So the Philadelphia Eagles' initial 53-man roster is officially set, and man did they make some shocking decisions, as not only were there multiple guys who they let go that most people expected to make the roster, but of that group, the Eagles also ended up cutting multiple guys that were once expected to have pretty significant roles on the team this year, and these cuts could end up having some pretty big implications, as it could now be a lot more likely that the Eagles go out and make some new acquisitions to the team that could come in and contribute right away. And speaking of new acquisitions, the Eagles just made one in the midst of their final roster cuts by way of trade, and it was a very interesting move. Plus, on top of that, just because some of these guys have been cut doesn't mean that their career in the NFL or with the Eagles is over. So who out of the Eagles releases could end up on the practice squad, and who may find themselves playing for a different team at the start of the season? Well, we're going to talk about all that in this video today, so let's not waste any time and get straight into it. So as I said, the Eagles, just like every other NFL team at this point, have trimmed their roster down to 53 guys, and in the process, they had to make some really tough decisions, and there were definitely quite a few surprising cuts. And in addition to that, there were some guys that we kind of knew weren't going to make the roster, but they were bigger names nonetheless, and it was really interesting to see them go. Now, before we get into all that and we talk about who the Eagles cut, I do want to start with a couple guys who did make the Eagles' initial 53-man roster, one of which arrived by way of trade, as the Eagles made a deal with the Denver Broncos just before the 4 p.m. cut-down deadline, in which they traded a 2025 6th-round pick, and in return they received a 2025 7th-round pick, but more notably, tight end Alfred Okwuegbunam. There's no shot I said that right. But this is a really interesting deal because it seemed like Alfred O was going to be cut by the Broncos. In fact, there were reports out early on Tuesday saying that he would be cut, but the Eagles liked him enough to go out and actually make a deal for him, so that should give you an idea of how they think of this guy. And Alfred is a guy who in his short 3-year career with the Broncos has pretty much just been a backup tight end. He's never really had a huge role on his team. Easily his best year in the league was in 2021 when he caught 33 passes for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns, but what makes him a really intriguing player is his physical tools, as he's a big dude coming in at 6'5", 258 pounds, and he's also really fast, as he ran a 4.49 40-yard dash at the combine, making him just the 5th tight end in NFL history to ever run below a 4.5 at the combine. So his physical ability is there, and now it's just about the Eagles developing him and putting all the pieces together because he's got potential. I mean, he's just coming off a fantastic showing in the Broncos preseason finale where he caught 7 balls for 109 yards and a touchdown. So he now comes to the Eagles with the hope of carving himself out a role with the team, even in a pretty crowded tight end room, while he also hopes to continue developing on the Eagles roster. Now, someone else who, like Alfred, has secured himself a spot on the initial 53-man roster is undrafted rookie cornerback Eli Ricks, and this is someone who obviously I'm really excited about. I mean, he was a huge standout from the preseason, which I've already talked about a ton recently. I mean, that pick 6 versus the Ravens in the first preseason game was just nasty, and he was really locking guys down pretty much throughout the entire preseason, so his efforts have now earned him a roster spot, and it really just does go to show you that anyone can make the roster no matter what position they're in. I mean, the cornerback spot is a position that the Eagles are really deep at, but Ricks made it impossible for the Eagles not to keep him around. Now he will officially be a part of a really nice young core the Eagles have built at the cornerback position, along with guys like Josh Jobe and Kelee Ringo. And who knows, maybe Ricks develops all the way to the point where once Slay and Bradbury are done in Philly, he's in line for a starting job. Now, obviously, that's a long ways away if that were to happen, but for now, it's just exciting that he made the initial 53-man roster. But while Ricks beat the odds and earned his spot, there were tons of guys who weren't able to do that and who found themselves being released prior to Tuesday's deadline, and there were some really notable names in that group, and that starts with running back Trey Sermon, which we kind of saw the writing on the wall for Sermon. We knew that the Eagles only wanted to keep 4 running backs, and by the time we got to cutdown day, Swift, Gainwell, Penny, and Scott all had solidified their spots on the roster, leaving Sermon as the odd man out, which definitely does stink because Sermon is a guy with talent, and if he's given an opportunity, he could definitely perform well. It's just that there was really no opportunity for him here in Philly, so now he's been released, and other teams almost certainly will have interest in picking him up. Now, if no team does, I'm sure that the Eagles would be thrilled to bring him back to the practice squad. It's just, I really don't think that's going to happen. Sermon's a pretty talented guy whose services could be used elsewhere, so I expect some other team to sign him, and if that happens, I wish him nothing but the best, but I guess we'll see. Now, another bigger name who the Eagles cut was linebacker Nicholas Morrow, which was kind of a shocker given the fact that just months ago, the Eagles signed Morrow in hopes of him being a starter for this team, and he entered camp expected to win that job as he got a lot of the first team reps throughout camp. But it seems that he just didn't do enough to outshine some of the other guys. His newly acquired linebacker Zach Cunningham played really well from the time he got here, and he pretty pretty much ended up earning the starting job next to Covey, and Christian Ellis really emerged this offseason, and he outperformed Morrow as well. So now Morrow will have the opportunity to sign somewhere else. He's very similar to Sermon, where if the Eagles get the opportunity to add him back to the practice squad, I'm sure that they will, but I think more than likely some other team will come in and sign him. So if this is it for Morrow in Philly, it was definitely an interesting ride, with him going from a projected starter to a before season cut. And someone else who kind of fits that bill is safety K'Von Wallace, as after it seeming like there was a very real chance that he could actually start for this team alongside Reed Blankenship, with him getting first team reps at safety throughout camp and even making some plays, he has now been cut by the Eagles. And like the last two guys I mentioned, if the Eagles get the chance to bring him back to the practice squad, they probably will, but I just don't think that's going to happen. There are already reports out there saying that Wallace has a lot of interest from other teams, so if this is truly the end for K'Von Wallace in Philly, it was kind of a disappointing few seasons, to be honest, as many thought he would be a good player, and he just never became that. But now the battle for the Eagles' second starting safety spot is now down to Sidney Brown, Terrell Edmunds, and Justin Evans, who all have pretty decent cases, so I guess we'll see how that plays out, and I'm curious to hear who you guys think is going to start, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments. So the Eagles made plenty more notable cuts, some of which were really surprising and could potentially have huge implications. So don't worry, we're going to get to all that in just a bit, but real quick I have to say, if you are enjoying this video and want to see others like it coming in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Around 80% of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed. If you're one of those people, you've been consistently watching the videos, you're enjoying them, and you love the Philadelphia Eagles and don't want to miss any more future coverage on them coming this season, make sure you fix that right now, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss when any other videos are uploaded, and also subscribe to the second channel, PhillyFan21 Productions, so you don't miss when I drop my Eagles hype video, which is coming very soon. I think that's a win-win for the both of us. Now with that being said, let's get back into the video. So the Eagles made a lot of notable cuts at the wide receiver position, one of which just a couple weeks ago seemed like he was on the verge of earning himself a roster spot, and that is undrafted rookie Joseph Ngata, as after shining early in training camp, he seemed to slow down in the second half of camp, and he did not have a great showing in the preseason, so the Eagles then decided to cut him. So I guess we'll see if any other team signs him. I think if not, the Eagles will certainly add him back to the practice squad, and someone I feel similarly about is veteran Greg Ward, who was cut yet again by the Eagles despite being reliable when called upon throughout his career and making plays for the Eagles in the past, but I guess the Eagles just didn't feel that there was a space for him on this roster despite the history that Ward has with this team. Now it is worth noting that Greg Ward can sign with the Eagles practice squad without clearing waivers, so that's a good thing and something I'm almost certain that the Eagles would want to do, but Ward could also choose to sign with another team and get the opportunity for a bigger role, so if he decides to do that, I'll be happy for him, but at the same time, I want the legend G Ward to stay. I want him to sign back with the practice squad, so I really hope that we get the news soon that he has agreed to come back, but if we don't, then I wish him nothing but the best. And someone else who I hope lands with the practice squad is the Olympian Devon Allen, who the Eagles also cut ahead of Tuesday's deadline, and I do think that the second-year NFL receiver has good potential on special teams, specifically as a returner and gunner if he is given the chance to prove it. I mean, we know he's got elite speed, and he flashed his ability as a return man in the Eagles' last preseason game versus the Colts, and in the preseason of 2022, he really flashed as a gunner, and he did the same in this year's game versus the Colts as well, so I'd like to see him stick around and maybe get an opportunity on special teams at some point this year, but I guess we'll see if the Eagles have any interest in bringing him back. But speaking of returners, the Eagles surprisingly released the guy who many thought would be their return man this year in Britton Covey, as Covey returned kicks and punts for the team pretty much all last season, and to be honest, he didn't really do too much. I mean, towards the end of the season, he started to come on a little bit more, and he was playing a little bit better, but for the most part, he just kind of went out there, caught the ball, and never really did much with it. I mean, props to him for not muffing it or fumbling it, so at least he had good ball security, but I guess his showing last year as well as this year in camp just wasn't enough for the Eagles to keep him around on the roster. So now it's being reported that the Eagles could try and keep Covey on the practice squad, and he could maybe even return to the 53-man roster, so I guess we'll see if that happens, but still, it is very interesting that the Eagles don't have any clear return man on the roster at this point, and there's seemingly a very real shot that the Eagles move in a different direction at that spot, and I'll be interested to see if that's on the roster, or if that's externally, if they go out and get somebody else to bring in to return kicks and punts. I guess we'll see. But somewhere else that the Eagles are clearly looking to move in a different direction is at punter. Now last year, Arryn Siposs was the starter for the Eagles, but he never really played all that well, only averaging around 45 yards per punt, which is not that good, and then he was also graded the second worst of over 40 punters last year. Fast forward to this offseason, and Siposs struggled once again, so the Eagles made the decision to cut him, which I am super happy about. I've been thinking for a while that the Eagles need a new punter, and I'm glad that it seems like the Eagles agree with that and they're looking to move in a new direction. So what are the potential potential options for the Eagles moving forward at punter now that they don't have one on the roster currently? Well, for starters, there is a report out recently saying that the Eagles and the Steelers could be working on a deal where the Eagles would acquire punter Braden Mann, who's definitely a step up over Siposs. I mean, his average from last year wasn't too much higher, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, he's easily an upgrade over Siposs, as Mann was graded the 4th best punter by PFF last year, but this may not be the only move that the Eagles are trying to make at punter, as there are a few reports out there saying that the Eagles will be bringing in some guys to work out and compete for the job. And there is one guy out there who Eagles fans have been hoping all offseason would end up a part of this team, and you gotta wonder if he's someone that the Eagles are gonna bring in for a shot at this job. And that is none other than the punt god himself, Matt Araiza. I mean, it seems like that could be a real possibility, as just a few days ago, Mike Florio reported that it could be a matter of if not when Araiza will get his second chance in the NFL. Now, of course, his first chance was destroyed by the lawsuit filed against him last year around this time, accusing him of gang, but he has since been cleared of any charges because it was found that he was not present during the alleged incident. So this may be Araiza's best chance to get back into the league, as the Eagles have an open spot, and Araiza, in my mind, should be one of the leading candidates for it. I mean, this guy has been on record bombing 80-yard punts before in actual games. He did that with the Bills last preseason, he did it in college, and he also, speaking of college, set a ton of records. I mean, this guy has a huge leg, and the Eagles could turn punter from a weakness into a strength if they replace Siposs with Araiza. I mean, I personally think that the Eagles should 100% bring this guy in, but what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And also, what do you think of all the roster moves that the Eagles made on Tuesday ahead of the deadline, and who should return to the practice squad? And if there's already news regarding that, what do you think of some of the moves the Eagles have already made today regarding the practice squad or signing other players from other teams? Again, if that stuff has already happened by the time you're seeing this video. And also, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like on it to show some support, and subscribe so you don't miss any others like it coming in the future. And also, again, subscribe to the second channel, Philly Fan 21 Productions, so you don't miss when I drop my Eagles hype video or any other future Eagles and Sixers hype videos in the future. And also, if you want to watch another video going over some other Eagles roster moves as well as some injury updates ahead of the Eagles Week 1 matchup versus the Patriots, you can go watch it right here. Now, with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.